It is so good to be with you today. I'm Wolfgang, I work here, and I'm excited about next week, of course, as Shirley said, Easter, sort of Super Bowl Sunday in church land. So we are so thrilled for what's gonna happen next week with 4 services here on our Kirkland campus, and looking forward to celebrating Easter actually next week with you up at Mill Creek. I'll get a chance to speak up there next week, so happy to celebrate Easter with you guys. And let me just quickly say, for those of you who join us online, of course, we're thrilled to have you every week, but there is nothing like celebrating Easter in person. And so if you're local, I hope you'll come and join us. And we would love to see you again, either here at Kirkland, at any of our 4, or up there at Mill Creek as well. So great stuff going on, and so excited about that special celebration. That's all next week. Today, as Shirley kind of mentioned, today marks the beginning of a very special week. Some of you may know it as Holy Week, you may know it as the Passion Week, and it's this week leading up to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. And because this week is special, I want to do something sort of different today than we normally would, and I'm very glad you're here for it. I'm so excited about this. Because it is amazing how much can happen in a week, isn't it? It's amazing how much can happen in a day. Sometimes it's good things, right? I remember so well. Many of you know we lived for years in Las Vegas, served a church there, and good friends whose parents one night went out for Mexican at their favorite restaurant there inside one of the casinos. And while they were waiting for their table, they sat down and started playing a few bucks on the slot machines, when all of a sudden, all the lights went down on the machine and the alarms began going off. And my friend's parents won $27.6 million. They hit megabucks, it's called. Changed their life, as you can imagine. They very generously hosted our baby shower, actually. It was a lovely home, you can imagine. Great house, as you can imagine, right? Good things can happen in a day. But of course, most of us know bad things can come. In a day, the diagnosis, or the accident, or the relational implosion. We all know it comes in many shapes and sizes, but a lot can happen in a day. And a lot happened each of these days of Holy Week. Some incredible highs and some very dark lows. And when you put it all together, I believe it adds up to the single most important week in the life of the single most important person who's ever lived. And so we're pushing pause on this study that we've been over these last several months, studying through the Sermon on the Mount. And I want to just walk today, day by day, through the events of that Holy Week. Now, the gospel writers thought this week was so important that they actually devote a disproportionate amount of their account of Jesus' life to just this a single week. In fact, all of Matthew, all 28 chapters, 8 of those chapters are about this week. It's almost a third. Same true of the other gospels. For Mark, 6 out of 16, almost 40% of his gospel is only about this week. The authors went out of their way to include so much more detail and so much, in fact, way more than we can actually get through today. But I want to touch on just a few key moments of those days that week, because the things that Jesus did and the things that Jesus said, they still confront me and you. They challenge, they stretch, they convict, they inspire. As I've been wrestling through this week, I've been challenged in some deep ways, and maybe you will be today as well. Now, the first thing that you have to understand to get what's going on here is to know that this was already a very special week to begin with. This was Passover week. And in fact, you may know Passover started today. So, Hag Sameach. Passover, or Pesach in Hebrew, is this incredible celebration, this pilgrimage festival where people from across the world in Jesus' day would come to celebrate there in Jerusalem. And so the city, which is less than a square mile in size, Jerusalem, normally about 40,000 people, which incidentally is roughly the population of Bothell, that would swell by 6 times for festival week. You think it's hard to find parking in downtown Bothell now, you know what I'm saying? Try adding another 250,000 people to the mix. So this place is crowded, full of tired pilgrims, some of whom come a very long way to be part of this celebration there in Jerusalem. And all these people were gathered to celebrate what is the most ancient and one of the most important holidays for the Jewish people, as I said, Passover. And this annual celebration commemorated the liberation of the Jewish people from their 400 years of slavery in Egypt. More than 1,000 years before Jesus lived, God sent Moses to the Egyptian king Pharaoh. Some of you may be familiar with the story. You've seen movies, read about it, heard about it. Pharaoh refuses when God tells him to let the people go, and so God sends a series of plagues, 10 of them, until finally, to force Pharaoh's hand, the last and most devastating of the plagues is declared. It is the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. Just quick curiosity, how many firstborns do we have in the room? Yeah? Hey, good-looking, responsible group, you firstborns. How about middles? Do we have any middle kids in the room? Look at you. Peacemaker, yeah, right. How about any babies? Youngest in the room. Oh, yes. Rowdy bunch. Look at them. They throw their hands up proudly. But anyway. Now, as a firstborn, I've always read this story a little differently, okay? God said he would send the angel of death to take the lives of the firstborn sons unless each household took a lamb. They sacrificed it, and they put some of that lamb's blood around the doorpost of their house. And when the death angel would come and see that blood, he would pass over their house. That's why it's called Passover. You follow? So from the time of the Exodus, or the leaving of Egypt, until the time of Jesus, the Jewish people had celebrated this holiday almost every year for somewhere between 13 and 1,500 years, depending on how you date the Exodus. Now, if you want to understand so much of what Jesus said and did, not just this week, but throughout his ministry, you need to keep this critical holiday in mind. And it is so easy for us to miss this, those of us that are of non-Jewish background, or Gentiles, as the Bible would call us. But think of it like this. If you were to combine the 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, and Thanksgiving into a single holiday, you'd have some sense of what Passover is all about. That's why all these people were gathering in Jerusalem, because it was the only authorized place that you could sacrifice the Passover lamb, at the temple there in Jerusalem. So all these pilgrims would travel, some from far, far away, to this festival. And Jesus and his disciples, being faithful Jewish men and women, they came as well. And once again, the people of God were under the oppression of a new Egypt. This time, the Romans. And all the songs and celebrations of the Passover are about how God rescues his people from their oppressors, how he defeats and throws off their oppressors. One of the psalms that we know they would sing as part of this celebration is Psalm 118. Here are a few lines from Psalm 118. He says, "The Lord is with me. He is my helper. I look in triumph on my enemies. All the nations surround me, but in the name of the Lord, I cut them down. They surrounded me on every side, but in the name of the Lord, I cut them down." Can you imagine people singing that, walking through the streets that are being patrolled by Roman soldiers? Hearing songs about being cut down? You think that landed well with the legions? The point is, the crowds are huge. The tensions are high as the week begins. And things just get more intense as the Sunday of Holy Week begins. Now, as was mentioned earlier, it's Palm Sunday, it's known as, when Jesus arrives with his disciples for the beginning of the celebration. And he famously, as you see in the graphic, comes riding in on a donkey. Most people have heard of this. And this is an incredibly important detail that is just loaded with significance. For one, 1,000 years before this, King Solomon himself, when he was crowned king, he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. A prophet named Zechariah, he had predicted 500 years before Jesus ever lived that there would come a Messiah, a new king and deliverer who would come riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. Jesus did not choose his mode of transit by accident. This is a very intentional step, and everybody in the crowd knew exactly what it meant. The people got the reference. And so, we hear them quoted singing a later part of Psalm 118 that I read a little bit of earlier. Listen to this. If you know anything about the story, see if this sounds familiar. I'm sorry, it's 25. Next verse over here. Lord, save us, which in Hebrew, Hosanna. This is Psalm 118. Hosanna, Lord, grant us success. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. From the house of the Lord we bless you. The Lord is God, and he has made his light shine on us. With boughs in hand, join in the festal procession up to the horns of the altar. Did you catch that? With boughs in hand. It's exactly what we know as Palm Sunday. They're quoting, living out Psalm 118, this great promised coming centuries before Jesus ever even walked the earth. And they wave these palm branches. This is an exceptionally cheap one from Amazon. They wave these palm branches, praising him, welcoming him into the city, declaring him as king in what we know as the triumphal entry. And as I've been preparing for this message and for this Easter, I've been thinking about this week. I want to do this in my life. I want to welcome him in. I want to throw the doors open and receive my king in a world that competes for my attention in so many other ways. I want to welcome him in, to open the door. I wonder, have you done that? Have you opened that door? Welcomed him in? Have you taken that beautiful sort of beginning step of baptism when it comes to following Jesus? This beautiful sort of initiation, if you will, this beautiful symbolic rebirth that in so many ways reenacts the first Easter, right? Our death and resurrection, just like Jesus. Have you done that? And if you haven't, next week's a great chance. We'll be celebrating during Easter. Maybe you got to be part of that. That might be your next step. Opening the door, saying, Lord, save me, not just save us. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is this one from the book of Revelation, where Jesus himself says, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. He is knocking. He doesn't kick the door down. He waits till you open it. But he desperately wants to come in. And maybe this will be the Easter where that's someone in your life that you care about that hasn't welcomed him in. You'll find the courage to invite them, and that one day might change their life forever. So who are you inviting? It's amazing how much one day can change. Palm Sunday confronts me with this question. Will I welcome him in? They began the week welcoming him, hoping that he was the deliverer, recognizing him as the king that they'd been waiting for. And while the Romans were still in control, of course, Caesar doesn't like this idea of other kings. And so this is a powder keg that is waiting to detonate, which makes what happens on Monday even more shocking. Now, generally, Mondays get a bad rap in general, don't they? I mean, I don't know what it is, but it just seems like the alarm goes off a little extra early on Monday, doesn't it? What is that? But this Monday of Holy Week is anything but ordinary. Unless, of course, you think of an ordinary Monday as the Son of God angrily coming to your city and tossing over furniture, right? Because that's what happens this Monday. Look at Luke chapter 19, verses 45 and following. It says, when Jesus entered the temple courts, he began to drive out those who were selling. Jesus said, it is written, he said to them, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. What's happening here? What's going on? What's the deal? What's he so mad about? Well, all these pilgrims, they have traveled multiple days to get to Jerusalem. And rather than packing or bringing along their sacrificial animal, and because Amazon lockers had not yet been invented, the pilgrims would have to buy their animals on site there in the marketplace around the temple. So enterprising business people would set up stands, selling sacrificial animals, exchanging currencies for people from out of town. And because the people didn't have very many options on where to buy these things, the vendors could pretty much charge whatever they wanted. And it still happens like this. For example, you go to a Kraken game. A beer costs $20, I'm told. I can neither confirm nor deny this. That's what I hear. You could get a couple of six-packs for that at Fred Meyer, I'm told. But this, of course, is so much more than overpriced concessions at a special event. This is people who have come to worship being fleeced by unscrupulous vendors. And they've begun to blend the things of God with a little of the world stuff too. The greed of the world. And Jesus won't stand for it. I mean, can you imagine Jesus going to Climate Pledge Arena in his Kraken jersey? Because, of course, Jesus is a Kraken fan. And he starts pulling the cans off the cooler shelves. He dumps the nacho cheese at the nacho stand. You know what I'm saying? That's fighting words right there, guys, right? You want to see security move quick? Dump the cheese. That's all I got to say, right? Now, multiply that by a factor of 1,000. Because scholars believe both the Romans and the temple authorities, the religious leaders, they already were getting a cut of the profits. And they already hated Jesus to begin with. They got a monopoly on this stuff. And Jesus comes with one of these, and he begins to break up the crowd. Can I ask for a volunteer, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna know. I'm just kidding. He starts working his way through that place, running people out, overthrowing their tables, spilling their coins, chasing away the animals they were trying to sell in the marketplace. It says he came with a whip, running them out. Sometimes people have this picture of Jesus like he's this free love, never confronts anything. Whatever works for you, man. Jesus is just all about love. I don't know what Bible you're reading. Because when Jesus sees people being exploited, when he sees people being mistreated, when he sees people trying to make a quick buck off celebrating God, he will not stand for it. His blood boils, and he storms through that marketplace, destroying everything in sight. This is our King, friends. And I'll tell you, this guy had messed now with their traditions, these religious leaders. He had insulted their pride, but this time, he went after their wallets. And that's a line you just don't cross. Now, the challenge for us is obvious. Are there ways that I'm trying to have my little bit of God, but also have my little bit of, whatever else I want to compromise, to blend, to just sort of say, I'd like both Jesus and the American dream. Thank you very much. Not acknowledging that there are times when those two things collide. When we come to worship, or bringing our hearts to honor God, or just looking for what we can get out of it. Are there ways that we're trying to manipulate or exploit other people for our own benefit? Am I looking the other way when people are being mistreated or exploited? Jesus doesn't look the other way on those kinds of things. He brings a whip. And the exploitation of people makes his blood boil. He does not want to share you with other things. Monday challenges me to take an honest look at my own heart. Where have I been dressing up my desire for myself and my comfort and my security in cross-Jesus language, justifying whatever I do, whether it conflicts with him or not? We just search our hearts. So Jesus boldly confronts this kind of corruption, and the people love it. Because who wouldn't, right? When you see the exploiter finally get theirs, don't you love that? When the insider traders are finally found out and convicted, isn't that a good day? It just makes Jesus even more popular with the people, which of course causes even bigger problems for the religious leaders of the day. And so they crank up their plans to try to discredit Jesus, to shut him up, to turn the crowds against him. Look how Luke records it in Luke 19:47. It says, every day Jesus was teaching at the temple, but the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Yet they could not find any way to do it because all the people hung on his words. Which brings us to Tuesday. Jesus returns to the temple, and these religious leaders are waiting. They've come up with a series of questions to try to entrap Jesus, to get him to misspeak, to get him to incriminate himself by saying the wrong thing, either something that will agitate the Romans or something that will agitate the people. And so Jesus spends the entire day underneath one of these, being inspected. That's a little creepy. Isn't that creepy? Yeah, you like that? Being examined, checking him over, questioned, inspected. They hit him with all kinds of questions, all designed to trap him. What's the greatest commandment, Rabbi? By what authority do you do these things? They hit him with complicated hypotheticals. Say a man dies and his wife marries his brother, but then that brother dies. And then that happens again and again and again. This is literally a question they ask him. And again and again. In eternity, whose wife will she be? Right? I'm sure they were really worried about that, right? One of the most famous confrontations comes in Luke chapter 20, beginning down in verse 20, when it says, keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor, the Romans. So the spies questioned him, teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? He saw through their duplicity and said to them, show me a denarius, it's a coin. Whose image and inscription are on it? Caesar's, they replied. He said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. They were unable to trap him in what he said there in public. And astonished by his answer, they became silent. It's just brilliant, right? Whose image is on the coin? Caesar's. So give it to Caesar. Whose image is on you? God's image. So you give God what's God's. Don't get so caught up in all that Caesar stuff. Oh, mic drop. It shuts them up. They have nothing to say. He's just too good for them. And let me just quickly say something here, because sometimes people get confused about this. It is not a bad thing to ask Jesus questions. It is not a bad thing to pull out one of these and begin to really examine the claims that Jesus made, to examine the evidence for his resurrection, to examine him for yourself. So many people, somewhere along the line, get this mistaken impression that you should never question. They feel shamed if they ever doubt or want to dig further or need more evidence. Jesus invites us to pull out the magnifying glass, friends. He holds up to scrutiny. Explore him for yourself, but do it with a sincere heart. Don't do it with this agenda to try to tear him down wherever you can find a chance. Come honestly and authentically. Ask away. And one person who did just that from a generation ago was a man named C.S. Lewis. Many of you know that name, but he was an atheist who had set out to disprove Christianity, or at least explore the questions around it, and wound up becoming probably the most influential Christian thinker and writer of the last century. And here is my favorite quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. This is too important to treat casually, so get out the magnifying glass. Ask the questions. Dig deeper. Great place to do that, of course, is in Alpha. And here at North Shore, we're not planning another Alpha until this fall, but a friend of mine's leading an Alpha just down 405 in Bellevue at a church called Westminster Chapel. And theirs is starting in a couple weeks. Tell them Wolfgang sent you. And this brings us to Wednesday. Now, we don't have a lot of detail on Wednesday, to be honest. But the gospel writers tell us that there is another story unfolding in Jerusalem. It's the religious leaders who are trying to figure out how to get rid of Jesus. They failed in questioning him. Now they've got to just take more serious steps. He's a threat to the stability of their lives, to their power, to their comfort and affluence. And here we get to know more about this one of the 12 who becomes famous, infamous, Judas Iscariot, who makes a deal with religious leaders. Now, authors, storytellers, filmmakers, they have speculated as to what was behind Judas. Is he trying to, is he that greedy? Is he trying to somehow, force Jesus' hand by arranging a confrontation? We just don't know. And even if his intentions are good, or he felt like it was the right thing to do, clearly he's misguided. We don't know, but famously, we all know, Judas agrees to betray Jesus for what? Remember? 30 pieces of silver. That's all it is right there. 30 little pieces of silver. And it challenges me when I hear these coins jingle in my hand. What's my price? What's my price? Where's that line where I'd be willing to turn my back on Jesus for the sake of something else? When I don't think he's doing it the way I think he ought to do it. Or when I feel let down or disappointed. Or when I suddenly become more interested in my own comfort or my own image or what people think of me. What will I trade? My integrity? My ambition? Wednesday confronts me with this question. It's a hard week thinking all these questions, isn't it? Which brings us to Thursday. Thursday was the day to prepare for the Passover meal. And there were specific rituals that were part of preparing for Passover. You can read more about this in the Old Testament. One of those rituals was you were to thoroughly cleanse the house of any yeast. It represented sin. Thoroughly cleanse any impurity from the house, which, wait a second, that sounds familiar. Isn't that exactly what happened on Monday? When Jesus went into that temple to clean house? And then another step in the process, once you'd chosen your Passover lamb, they had to be given a thorough inspection. They had to be absolutely perfect, without blemish, inspected from nose to tail. Wait a second. That sounds familiar. Wasn't that Tuesday when they pulled out the magnifying glass and they ensured he was perfect without blemish? All these beautiful symbols woven in, Jesus fulfills at levels we're not even aware of. But that Thursday night, he sat down to eat this Passover meal with his disciples. And many of you may know, this is the night he famously washes the feet of his followers, including, of course, Judas, who's just about to betray him. And then he takes some of the symbols of this ancient Seder meal that remind the people of this amazing liberation that they experienced, including a cup that he took and infused new meaning into this beautiful cup and the wine in it. Some of you look at this cup, this looks familiar. If you remember the Indiana Jones Last Crusade movie, this is a recreation of that prop. Someone gave it to me as a present. You have chosen wisely, right? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, we don't know what the cup looks like, but who cares? It's not about the cup. Who cares? What the cup represented was this reminder of liberation from Egypt, freedom for the people. And Jesus expands the meaning of this cup to be so much more than just some sort of freedom, political freedom, but a freedom from slavery to sin, freedom from slavery to death. Thanks to the blood of the Passover lamb, Jesus himself, who gave his life that Friday. And of course, this Friday, we'll gather here in this room to remember that night and all that followed. So I won't say much, but I hope you'll be here for that very special night of prayer and scripture right here on our Kirkland campus at 6:30. It's a highlight for many folks each year. I hope you'll be here for it. Because there's so much more that we could say about that Friday, about after finishing with his disciples, going to pray in the garden, being arrested and run through a series of mock trials that were just a joke, and ultimately being sentenced to death, subject to torture and humiliation, including having one of these shoved on his head. A little crown of thorns, forced down into that sensitive skin around your temple. You know what I mean? It just hurts more there, doesn't it? They shove it down on his head, mocking him as this king on that Friday we call good, hanging him on a cross as the perfect Passover lamb. Now, I know that's a lot, because a lot can happen in a week, and it's still really only the tip of the iceberg. But what do we do to this, with this? Well, as I said, this confronts me to think about some stuff. Where are those areas I'm trying to have it both ways that Jesus wants to cleanse, to break free? What are the things that I'm willing to trade or tempted to compromise? What are the questions I haven't let myself ask, but I need to? Will I open my heart to receive this King? Will I come to his table and celebrate with him the liberation I can experience from my sin and my failure? And will I crown him with a proper crown as the leader, the owner of my life? Those are the most important questions of life, friends. I don't know more important questions. How do you answer those questions? You know, many scholars believe that the exact time that Jesus was hung on the cross that Friday, that was the exact time that the priests began sacrificing the Passover lambs there at the temple. The connection couldn't be clearer. It's why when you hear Jesus referred to as the Lamb of God, that's what they're talking about. He is the ultimate Passover sacrifice. Passover to sacrifice to free the people from their sin and from death. This Lamb of God. But of course, that sacrificial lamb didn't stay dead. He rose from the grave, and we'll celebrate that next week. That's why in the book of Revelation, there is this mysterious but vivid image painted when we get to peek into heaven. And it describes a lamb who has been slaughtered, but is very much alive. And it says there are tens of thousands of angels singing, and this is the song they're singing. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. He alone is worthy of power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. Tens of thousands of angels are singing that to Jesus right now. And I want to join them. What about you? And so will you stand with me as we get ready to worship and to sing? Who else is worthy? Who else is worthy? There is no one like Jesus. Let's worship him together.